Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be exploring something I think pretty relevant to all of us, right?
Oh, yeah.
The nature of love.
Definitely.
We're diving deep into some notes from Ron W Rathbun, and he lays out some pretty interesting connections between love and consciousness in these notes.
Yeah.
So our mission is to kind of unpack these ideas and hopefully, help all of you listening understand maybe your own experiences with love a little bit better.
Absolutely.
And maybe we'll all leave pondering some big questions about life itself,
Yeah, for sure. Rathbun is talking about something way deeper, like the core essence of love as this powerful force in our lives. And honestly, it's pretty mind-blowing.
It really is. His notes are from December 24th, 2024.
Oh, wow. Christmas Eve.
Yeah, very fitting. And one of the first things that really jumped out at me was his idea that love isn't actually an emotion itself.
Wait, what? So if I'm feeling all giddy and lovey-dovey or, heartbroken?
Right, all those intense feelings.
Yeah, that's not actually love.
That's what Rathbun said.
Okay.
And I know it sounds kind of paradoxical, but
It does.
But stay with me here. He suggests that love is more like the source from where all our emotions spring.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So instead of love being like a specific feeling, it's more like this...
Like the underlying energy.
Yeah, like the wellspring or something?
Exactly. He uses this analogy of a deep ocean.
Okay.
So imagine the ocean, right? It can be calm, it could be stormy. There can be waves crashing on the surface.
Right.
All those different states, those are like our emotions.
Hmm.
The joy, the sadness, the anger.
Oh, I see.
But the ocean itself, that constant presence beneath all the surface activity, that's what Rathbun equates to love.
Wow, that's actually a really cool way to think about it. So love is like this constant underlying presence, and our emotions are just how it's expressing itself in different ways.
You got it.
Right.
And what's even more interesting is how he connects this whole idea to consciousness.
Oh, yeah, I read that part in his notes, too. He was talking about how we need consciousness to actually experience love.
Right. It's like just as we need awareness to feel physical sensations like touch or temperature, we also need consciousness to experience love.
So it's not enough for something good to happen to us or for someone to love us. We have to actually be present and aware to really feel it.
Exactly. He's saying that our awareness plays a crucial role in how we experience love. If we're not paying attention, if we're totally zoned out, it's like we're numb to it.
Oh, man, that's so true. I know for me, when I'm like super stressed and just running on autopilot, I don't really feel much of anything. It's like I'm just going through the motions.
Yeah, it's like we're disconnected from that source of love, even if it's right there within us.
It makes you realize how important it is to slow down and be present so we can actually experience all the good stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, this ties into another fascinating idea that Rathbun brings up. He talks about emotions being either harmonious or disharmonious.
Harmonious and disharmonious. I remember that. What was that all about again?
He's basically saying that the quality of our emotions, how balanced and positive they are, is directly linked to our self-perception.
So how we see ourselves affects how we experience love.
Exactly. If we love and accept ourselves just as we are, that creates a foundation for experiencing more harmonious emotions, more peace, more joy, more gratitude.
But if we're constantly putting ourselves down or doubting ourselves...
Then it's like we're creating this breeding ground for more negative, disharmonious emotions, like shame, guilt, anxiety.
It's like trying to grow flowers in bad soil, right? They're not going to thrive.
Perfect analogy. And, this is where things start to get really practical, because a lot of us hear that message, love yourself. And we're like, yeah, that sounds great. But how?
Yeah, how do we actually do that?
Exactly.
Like, so much easier said than done.
It really is. But Rathbun gives us some clues. He emphasizes understanding the link between our thoughts and our emotions.
Oh, right. So like if we're constantly criticizing ourselves.
That inner voice is basically creating more disharmonious emotions.
So it's like we have to become aware of those negative thought patterns and then try to shift them.
Exactly. If we can start to replace those critical thoughts with more compassionate ones, that's when we start to cultivate more of that inner harmony.
I can see how that would make a big difference. It's like we're building ourselves up from the inside out.
Precisely. And that inner strength and self-love then becomes the foundation for experiencing love more fully in all areas of our lives.
Now, there was one other thing that I wanted to ask you about. It was that whole Kelee thing.
Ah, yes, the Kelee.
Rathbun describes it as this source of emotional welling, like the place where our feelings rise up from within.
It's definitely one of the more mysterious concepts in his notes.
Yeah, like what exactly is it? And where is it?
He doesn't give us a precise definition, which I think is part of what makes it so intriguing.
I guess so.
But You can sense that he's pointing to something deep within us, maybe even spiritual in nature.
Okay, so like think about those times when you've felt this surge of emotion seemingly out of nowhere.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Like when you hear a piece of music that just moves you to tears, or you witness a random act of kindness that just fills you with warmth.
Yeah, those moments when you feel so connected to something bigger than yourself.
Those moments of intense feeling, that welling up of emotion, that's what Rathbun seems to be associating with the Kelee.
It's almost like the Kelee is this hidden spring of love and life energy inside each of us.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
But if it's so deep down, how do we even access it? How do we tap into that wellspring?
Well, this brings us to another key idea from Rathbun's notes. He suggests that the decision to love and the act of loving are deeply intertwined.
Hold on, deciding to love, that sounds so intellectual. Can you really just choose to love something?
It's not about forcing a feeling. It's more about making a conscious commitment to align your actions with love.
So it's not just a feeling, it's a choice we make.
That's what Rathbun is suggesting.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting. And that's what we'll explore more in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. I can't wait to hear more about this whole love and action thing.
Me too. It's where Rathbun's ideas really start to get practical and applicable to our everyday lives. So we were talking about this idea that we can actually choose to love, and it's not just about, waiting for that feeling to strike us.
Right, because sometimes it feels like love is this thing that just happens to us, like we fall in love or we feel love for someone. But Rathbun is saying it's more active than that.
Exactly. It's about aligning our actions with love.
So it's almost like a muscle you have to exercise. Like you don't just wake up one day and magically know how to love. You have to practice it.
That's a great way to put it. It's about creating the right conditions for love to thrive.
But how do we actually do that? Like, what are some practical tips for working out that love muscle? Does Rathbun give us any guidance on that?
He emphasizes the importance of awareness, understanding our own patterns and tendencies.
Okay, so like, for example, let's say I have a habit of shutting down emotionally when things get tough.
Mm-hmm. Right, which is a very common pattern, by the way.
Yeah, it's like my default mode sometimes. But how does that play into this idea of choosing to love?
Well, by recognizing that pattern, you can start to make different choices in those moments. Instead of closing off, you might ask yourself, what would it look like to approach this situation with more love, both for yourself and for the other person?
So it's like catching ourselves in those moments and consciously choosing a different path, even if it feels uncomfortable at first.
Exactly. And those small conscious choices over time, they can lead to big shifts in how we experience and express love.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all ties back to the Kelee and that wellspring of emotion we were talking about. The more we make those conscious choices, the more we're tapping into that source.
That seems to be Rathbun's suggestion. It's like the Kelee is this vast reservoir of love and life energy. And by making choices aligned with love, we're essentially opening up the channels for it to flow more freely.
It's really amazing to think about the power we have within us. But let's be real, life isn't always easy. There are times when, things are tough and love feels really hard to come by. What does Rathbun say about dealing with those challenging times?
He doesn't shy away from the difficult emotions. In fact, he suggests that our capacity for love is actually strengthened through those experiences.
Really? How does that work?
He argues that by embracing the full spectrum of our emotions, the joy, the sorrow, the anger, the fear, we develop a deeper understanding of ourselves and our capacity for love.
So it's not about trying to force ourselves to be positive all the time.
Not at all. It's about recognizing that even the difficult emotions can be teachers. They can show us where we need to heal, where we need to grow, and ultimately they can help us cultivate a more resilient and compassionate form of love.
This whole conversation is making me realize how much I tend to oversimplify love. It's so much more complex and nuanced than I often give it credit for.
That's the beauty of diving deep into these ideas. We start to see that love isn't just this one-dimensional feeling. It's a dynamic force that's constantly evolving and shaping us.
Rathbun also talks about how our understanding of love is shaped by our lived experience. What does he mean by that?
It's like the difference between reading about swimming and actually jumping into the pool.
Yeah.
You can understand the concept intellectually, but you don't truly know it until you experience it firsthand.
That makes total sense. You can't learn to love just by reading a book or listening to a podcast, right? You have to actually live it.
Right. It's about putting those ideas into practice, making choices that reflect love, and learning from the inevitable stumbles along the way.
So it's a journey of learning and growth, not a destination we arrive at overnight.
Exactly. And the more we embrace that journey, the more we're likely to tap into that deep wellspring of love within us.
And to circle back to something we touched on earlier, how does this idea of lived experience tie into the Kelee?
It's like the Kelee is the source of that life energy, that raw potential for love. And by engaging with life fully, by embracing both the joys and the challenges, we're essentially activating and strengthening that source.
It's almost like we're building a stronger connection to that inner wellspring with every experience, every choice, every interaction.
Precisely. And the more we nurture that connection, the more love flows into our lives and out into the world around us.
This is all so inspiring, but I have to admit, it can feel a little daunting too. It's like Rathbun is setting a really high bar for what it means to truly love.
I think it's less about reaching some perfect ideal and more about recognizing that love is a process, an ongoing journey of discovery and growth.
And it's okay to make mistakes along the way, right?
Absolutely. In fact, those mistakes can be some of our greatest teachers. They show us where we need to adjust course, where we need to practice more compassion, both for ourselves and for others.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about being present and being open to learning and growing.
That's beautifully put. And remember, as we cultivate this deeper understanding of love, as we tap into the Kelee within, we not only transform our own lives, but we also contribute to creating a more loving and compassionate world.
That's a powerful thought. It's like we're all interconnected, and the love we cultivate within ourselves ripples outward, touching the lives of those around us.
Exactly. And that brings us to Rathbun's final point, which is all about embracing the transformative power of love, and that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've talked about love as the source of emotions and the Kelee and how we can actually choose to love. But I'm still a little fuzzy on how we take all of this and actually apply it to our lives. What does it look like to live with this deeper understanding of love?
Well, that's where Rathbun's idea of love and action comes in. He's not just talking about understanding love on an intellectual level.
Right. It's not just a philosophy.
Exactly. He's calling us to embody love, to let it guide our choices and our actions in the world.
So it's not enough to just think about love or talk about it. We have to actually live it.
Precisely. He uses this analogy of gardening. You can read all the books about it, but you won't truly understand gardening until you get your hands dirty, plant some seeds, watch them grow.
I love that analogy. So how do we start planting those seeds of love in our own lives? What does that look like in a practical sense?
It starts with small conscious choices.
Yeah.
Remember those habitual patterns we were talking about? Those moments where we tend to react in ways that maybe don't align with love?
Like when I get frustrated in traffic and start laying on the horn.
Right. We all have those moments.
Yeah, not my proudest moments, I'll admit. But how do we shift those patterns?
Instead of beating yourself up about it, what if you use that as an opportunity to practice a different way of being? Maybe take a deep breath, choose patience instead of anger. Remind yourself that everyone on the road is just trying to get where they need to go.
So it's about those little shifts in perspective. Those moments where we catch ourselves reacting habitually and we choose a more loving response instead.
Exactly. And those small choices over time, they create a more loving environment for ourselves and for those around us.
That makes sense. And this reminds me of something you said earlier about how even difficult emotions can be teachers. How does that fit into this idea of love in action?
Rathbun suggests that when we face those challenging emotions, instead of trying to suppress them or push them away, we approach them with curiosity and compassion.
So instead of thinking, I shouldn't be feeling this way, we ask ourselves, what is this emotion trying to teach me? What can I learn from it?
Exactly. It's about recognizing that all of our emotions are part of the human experience. And even the uncomfortable ones can point us toward greater understanding and growth.
I think this is so powerful, but I also know that a lot of people struggle with the idea that they can choose love, especially when they're going through really tough times. What would Rathbun say to someone who's, feeling lost, heartbroken, or just plain exhausted by life?
He would probably remind them that the Kelee, that wellspring of love within, is always there, even when it's hard to feel. It's like a pilot light that never goes out, even when the flame seems dim.
So even when we're struggling, even when we feel like we're running on empty, there's still that source of love within us that we can tap into.
Yes, and sometimes the simplest act of choosing love can be the spark that rekindles that flame. It might be reaching out to a friend, offering a kind word to a stranger, or just taking a moment to appreciate the beauty of the world around you.
It's like those small acts of kindness become a way of nourishing ourselves and replenishing that inner wellspring.
Beautifully put. And as we practice those acts of love, both big and small, the more we give love, the more we receive it, and the more it flows through us.
This whole conversation has really shifted my perspective. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of what it means to love. It's not just a feeling, it's a choice, it's a practice. It's a way of being in the world.
and it's a journey that unfolds throughout our lives. Rathbun's ideas offer us a roadmap, but ultimately it's up to each of us to navigate that path, to discover what love means in our own unique experience.
So for anyone listening who's feeling inspired to explore these ideas further, what would be your advice? Where do we start?
Start by paying attention. Notice those moments where you have a choice to react with love or with something else. Explore those habitual patterns and ask yourself, what did it look like to respond differently? What would it feel like to choose love in this moment?
It's not about being perfect, it's about making progress. It's about showing up every day with curiosity and with a willingness to learn and grow along the way. And you know what? I think that's a perfect place to wrap up this deep dive into Ron W Rathbun's ideas on love consciousness and that wellspring of emotion within us.
I agree. It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope it sparks some new insights and inspiration for our listeners as they continue to explore the transformative power of love in their own lives.